Hey everybody, it's Jack Reedy with Future Pastimes. In this video, I'm going to take a look at the first episode of Dune Prophecy, which aired last Sunday night on HBO and Max. And I watched it right when it aired. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm a huge Dune fan. Um, I think unsurprisingly, I'm a bigger fan of all of Frank Herbert's work, his 6 novels with the expanded Dune universe from Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson. It's a mixed bag for me. There's some books that I like pretty well, some books I don't really like a lot, and most of the books, it's in each book is a mixed bag. So there are parts that I like. I like most of the characters. I like a lot of the stories. The writing is to me, it's not only not anything like Frank's writing, which was very deep, very philosophical, very thought provoking. Here, it's very straightforward. Their writing is it's pretty on the nose. It's just action and dialogue, and not a lot of depth to it. But the Dune universe is a fascinating universe, so I do appreciate those expanded books because I like getting some more insights or some more things that pop up, even if some or all of it is made from whole cloth and has really little to nothing to do with specifically things that Frank created. I've made my peace with that. So that is the context for going into start watching Dune Prophecy. So right off the bat, I'm gonna go into some spoilers. So if you haven't watched it, well, I don't know why you're watching this. Maybe to get your impression. So I'll let you know that before I get into spoilers, overall I do like the show, and I feel like I'm going to like the subsequent episodes even more. The first episode, a pilot episode of a series, is always going to be the toughest one to really get right. It's got so much heavy lifting that it has to do. It's introducing all of the characters, all of the motivations. It's setting up the plot lines. It's creating context. It's got a lot to do, and there's a lot of world building that's going in. So even though it is the Dune universe, this is 10,000 years before the Dune that most people are going to be familiar with, especially if they've only seen the recent movies. So this is 10,000 years before, which itself, 10,000 years before Paul is not our era. It's not the year 2024. That's actually another 10,000 or years before Dune Prophecy. So, at the beginning of the first Dune movie, they're like, the year, it's 10,191. And you're thinking, oh, okay, wow, that's 10,000 years. That's a long time. Well, that's only half. It's actually twice as much that's 10,000 years since the Guild was formed and started to facilitate interplanetary and interstellar travel. So yeah, still quite a jump. And so that's one thing that people need to understand, and they do a decent job. And even people who are familiar with the Villeneuve movies don't really know anything about the true backstory. They don't know anything about the Balerian Jihad. So that's another thing that this episode, in the very beginning, they talk a little bit about the Butlerian Jihad. It's the machine war. It's the AIs that people have created that began to turn against their human overlords, and it was quite a devastating battle across many worlds. But the humans prevailed, and as such, they decided that they were never going to go down that path again, and they created this great convention, which doesn't many things, but one of them is this pact that all of the industrialized worlds have made, which is to never create thinking machines again. And so that is why Dune is a very Spartan-seeming society. It's not, they don't have a lot of computers and mechanized items, which is to say there's not no technology. There is technology, and something that the Ixians and to some extent the Richesse, or as they say in the show, Richese. And I'm going to get back to that here in a minute. But that is what we're talking about, is a world where there's not a lot of technology. And because of that, humanity has turned inward. And so after the jihad, the Butlerian jihad, or the human machine war, human beings turned inward and they began to develop themselves. And that takes three primary forms, but they're not exclusively. One is the creation of the mentats. The mentats are your human computers, and we haven't seen any mentats in this first episode of Dune Prophecy, and that is falling under the auspices of the Tleilaxu, or the Beni Tleilaxu, which we have not seen yet in the Villeneuve movies or on the show. Maybe they will show up. But mentats, human computers. Piter and Toofer Hawat in the Dune movies, those were mentats. They had their eyes would turn back into their head when they were doing calculations, and they had the funny little stain on their lip, probably juice of sappho, although they never say. So that's one way. The second is the navigators. It's their ability to do these complex navigational navigational calculations. And then the third is the Bene Gesserit, which they have a number of things that they do to improve themselves. This utter control over their own bodies, which manifests in many ways, including the voice, including their training of the way, which is referred to as the Weirding Way by the Fremen in the Dune book. But other elements as well, being able to determine the sex of a child when they are impregnated. That is part of their Bene Gesserit training and developing themselves as human beings, developing humanity. So what is going on in Dune Prophecy? Well, part of it is the formation of the Bene Gesserit sisterhood. Although when the show starts, we get a little bit of a prologue that talks about the end of the Machine War. And part of that is a little bit of some hot gossip, because it's being narrated by Valia Harkonnen, here played by Emily Watson, although we first see her as a younger actress. She's talking about the end of the Butlerian Jihad, where credit for winning the war for the humans falls largely on somebody from House Atreides. But she is insisting that was a lot of hoo-ha, and it really wasn't them. That was a lie. And along with that, the Harkonnen family was accused of trying to hide out the war or not be helpful, and they were accused of cowardice, and they were forced to settle on a less than stellar planet, although I don't think it's Gedi Prime, probably Lankavale. But in any case, she was basically exiled from House Harkonnen, possibly as some kind of punishment. It's a little bit ambiguous there, but she and her sister end up at this burgeoning sisterhood, and they become embroiled in a bit of a power struggle in the sisterhood. Their Mother Superior thinks that they need to start manipulating bloodlines and trying to get more control over the Imperium to ensure that, something like the Butlerian Jihad never happens again, or that corrupt rulers are not a thing they have to worry about. They want to get somebody from the sisterhood basically to be on the throne. And that's going to have some issues, but one of the first issues is that there are a number of the Order that don't think they should be meddling. They're trusted advisors. Their biggest asset to the Imperium is the fact that they are really good at being lie detectors. The truth-sayers are highly desired by the great houses. So they want to keep that up, but Valia ends up taking control of the school, and their breeding program, which is secret, is still their number one priority. So that's the basic setup of what is going on. Now, in that, we're meeting other characters. We're meeting the Emperor himself, played by Mark Strong, but he is not a strong Emperor. He's kind of at everybody's. Everyone's at his throat, and he has his Empress is strong-willed, but he's starting to not really trust her. He has a Bene Gesserit truth-sayer who's been a trusted advisor as well, and his daughter Michaela here is getting ready to go live at the Bene Gesserit school to train to really become her own truth-sayer. but she is the next in line. He has a son, Constantine, who, as I understand it, is not a legitimate. So he might be born of a concubine, or who else, but not from the. He's not the empress's daughter, son. So he's not really a contender for the throne. So the Bene Gesserit, they're really anxious to get their hands on Michaela to not only train her to be a formidable person, but to really get her on page with their cause. And so similar to what later on in life they do with Irulan. So Irulan is Shaddam's oldest daughter, and she goes and trains with the Bene Gesserit, and she's definitely on their agenda. So that's kind of what they want to do. But the monkey wrench in things is this character Desmond Hart, who apparently is a Carino soldier who's stationed on Arrakis. And he shows up one day after an attack where everyone is thought to be lost. And he explains that he is the lone survivor, but that it wasn't a Fremen raid on their spice holdings. It was some other Imperium people trying to steal the spice, and he is there to warn the Emperor, and he wants to be stationed there. And mixed up in it is this this wedding of convenience that the Emperor is going to approve between House Richese and House Carino by marrying the princess to young Duke-to-be, who's actually 9 years old, Pruitt Richese. And but yes, it's an arranged marriage, and it's because the Richese family will pledge to give a lot of fighting ships for the Emperor to use on Arrakis, but that the Duke, the Richese Duke, has higher aspirations, and central to them is control of spice production on Arrakis. So this is what's going on, and it's interesting. One of the scenes I really liked was that the Richese Baron, he's a count later on, one where I don't know how that gets sorted out, but the Baron here has a Bene Gesserit advisor, and so does Mark Strong. And while the two guys are hashing that out, the two Bene Gesserit witches are communicating through their silent, similar to the battle language that the Atreides use. And they are talking about the Bene Gesserit plans. And so that's a part that I really enjoyed, was that seeing that, yes, the Bene Gesserit, they have their prime directive, and it is for the sisterhood. And like, well, don't worry about him so much; he can be controlled and whatnot. So I like the machinations that are going on. This show has been and will continue to be compared to a sort of sci-fi Game of Thrones, and I think that's an apt comparison. You have great houses vying for control. They're playing a Game of Thrones, to be sure. What this has that Game of Thrones doesn't have is the spice factor, and so spice is critical. Spice is important for the Bene Gesserit. It is, and so the sandworms. That is how they get the water of life, and they use spice to enhance themselves. The Mentats use spice. The Navigators use a ton of spice. It's the most important resource. It's used for space travel, and it's just really important to have. And it is a sign of wealth, and so that is another factor on top of all of the other politics and intrigue that would have gone on without it. So you've got that extra layer on there, and the fact that it's only on one planet, and it's a planet filled with the Fremen, who are going to be presumably having their own agenda and their own identity. What's interesting is we've got this Desmond Hart character, who by all accounts is a Carino soldier. But at one point late in the pilot episode, Mark Strong gets a hold of some surveillance footage of what appears to be the attack that Hart and all of his other men and their equipment was destroyed. And we see that Desmond Hart apparently has planted a thumper, summoning a worm, which destroys everything and appears to destroy him as well, but it didn't destroy him. And so we're not sure who gave that footage to the Emperor. Did Hart leave that footage behind? It seems like he might have brought it, but why would he give it to the Emperor? That is an interesting little bit of information that I look forward to finding out. But yeah, what is his deal? The other thing is, and this is big spoilery, he ends up causing the young Baron Jr. or Duke, whatever he is, the Count, I guess he's a Duke, the Richese Duke's son, Pruitt, ends up killing him at the end of the episode in a really strange way. It looks like I read a couple of recaps that where they were insisting he was using his mind to set the kid on fire. I don't really think that's the case. There's nothing in Dune lore where people can do that. So that seems unlikely. A poison was what my first thought. Some kind of crazy poison that basically burned this kid alive, and it must have been a slow acting one because he didn't give him the poison right there. And the other thing is there's another character, the Bene Gesserit advisor to Carino, who has gone to Wallach 9 to warn the sisters that something's up and they need to do something about it, and she ends up burning alive too. And so the idea that Desmond Hart can look at somebody and set them on fire, that's a stretch right there. But then she is in another planet, systems away. It seems unlikely that he has the power to do that. I know he says something like, "I've been given a great power." I did not take away that is what it is, because there's just nothing. There's nothing in Dune, and it would seem absurd. It would be just like having a character who can fly. What? there's nothing. There's no way to justify that. So I'm looking forward to finding out what's really going on, and I'm hoping that's not the case. There's a little bit of a side plot here with Michaela, the princess. She's got the hots for her swordmaster, Kieran Atreides. So he is the royal swordmaster at House Carino. So presumably, Kieran is somebody who went to the Ganaz school on the behalf of the Duke of House Atreides, and then was maybe offered up as a as some kind of, hey, I'll give you my swordmaster to help train your daughter and whoever else in your staff. But they've clearly got a thing, but it's probably not appropriate for them to have a relationship. But they haven't made a big deal out of that yet, but that seems like a likely story beat that we will see later on. So the death of Pruitt Richese is surely going to piss off his father, who has just made this deal to give all these fighting ships to the Emperor on behalf of these other perks. Another thing that kind of pops up is at the engagement reception, the young Pruitt has a little mechanical device that freaks everybody out, because they're like, this is the sort of thing that reminds us too much of the thinking machines. His father, the Duke, is like, everyone is freaking out over a toy, but they're like, you know what? Too soon, brother. Too soon. Even though it's been over 100 years since the Butlerian Jihad, this is a sort of technology that really has no place in the Imperium. And so I think that it's an important distinction, because to me it says that House Richese is dabbling in forbidden technology or crossing lines, something that the Ixians much later on are commonly accused of doing. And so I will be curious to see if that Ixian and Richese division and competition rears its head at all in the show, if we'll get introduced to the Ixians, introduced to the Tleilaxu as well. That will be fun to see, because if they're starting to work on their Mentat school, that's where that's who you go to get a Mentat, is the Tleilaxu. So yeah, the writing is pretty good. I enjoy it. I didn't think there wasn't a lot of spiritual psychedelic mumbo jumbo, which you can get with a show about prophecy and strange dreams. There was a strange dream, and there's a lot of eye imagery in it. The worm mouth looks like an eye, and there's a lot of eyes hidden here and there everywhere in the show. And so it'll be curious to see how that shapes up to be. What I'm getting the sense is they think that they're getting a warning about what it is that they're doing with the breeding program could lead to the very thing that they're trying to avoid, which is exactly what does happen. They create the Kwisatz Haderach, Paul Atreides, but they do not control him, and he screws them up really good. But Valia Harkonnen is somebody who is determined that she thinks it's her way or the highway. And I will enjoy seeing how she does that. Because one of the things about prophecy and about dreams is that a lot of things are often open to interpretation, or you see what you want to see. And so I'm hoping that they play that up a lot, where like, I saw this vision and you think it's this, but I think it's that. And I think that's going to be a useful tool. So I hope that they go through. I'm really intrigued by this Desmond Hart character. I want to know more about him. I want to know when the Emperor is going to grow a spine and how that's going to turn out, because I feel like he is on the edge. So I think it is a good episode. I really I enjoy all things Dune, and if I can enjoy the Brian and Kevin books, which I mostly do, this is an even better. This is inspired by their Sisterhood of Dune book, but it is not beholden to it. They're taking their own pathways, which I think is good. I think the dialogue is much better than it is in those books. It sometimes is very space opera, very clunky and melodramatic. And here I don't get that sense. I like it. The production is clearly adjacent to the design and look and feel of the Villeneuve movies. So I love that continuity. It's different enough where you're like, all right, in 10,000 years, stuff's going to change, but some things will be the same and some fashions will come back around. So you get those hints of the familiarity. I enjoyed the shield fighting practice, so that's the same as it was in the movies. And there's lots of little bits. So the Richese thing I thought was funny. I was like, I know they're gonna. I know those characters are in it. I can't wait to see how they say it. And so, as we've been debating it, for the last several years, I've always gone off with the way it was pronounced in the Lynch movie. So right there in that very first scene, the guild navigator is talking about folding space from Ix, and he says, their machines are much better than Richesse. And so that's kind of, I'm an old school, and part of me thinks that they went with a different pronunciation is just because they are trying to separate themselves from the Lynch movie. I feel like that has been an edict from Villeneuve going all the way back. It's the reason why there's virtually, in those two movies, there is no dialogue from those two movies that is right out of the book. And it's like they went out of their way to change the dialogue so that it wouldn't be like the book, because the Lynch movie uses dialogue right out of the book. Some of it is word for word. And so they were like, and that Lynch movie is so quotable. And they're like, well, we're giving up a quotable movie because those Villeneuve movies are just not that quotable. That's one of my theories, but that sounds a little bit like a conspiracy theory, so maybe that's not the case. The other thing is, like in the Frank Herbert book, the name Richesse appears in a couple places. At one point, Duke Leto is talking about it, and the spelling there, they use two S's, so it really looks like Richesse. But in the back of the book, where you're getting the all the different words and terms, and Richesse is there, and it's only with one S there. And so that's a question mark, like which one was it supposed to be? And in subsequent bits of Dune lore, it keeps appearing as one S, and that's certainly the way they went with it in the expanded novels. So you get the impression that is supposed to be one S, but, did it show up as two S's because that's the way it sounded in Frank Herbert's head? And is that why Lynch went with Richesse when they were pronouncing it in that movie from the 80s? Who can say? So for me, I don't know. I'm having a crisis of how I should be saying it from now on. While I say Richesse, here's what I'm doing is 10,000 years before, of course they were Richese, but like Stephen Colbert comes from a long line of Colberts. Somewhere along the line, when they went from being a duke to a count, they decided to go with Richesse. So I'm going to keep saying Richesse when I'm talking about the Paul Atreides era of the family line. But we'll go with Richese when we're talking about the prophecy era. So keep up with me if you can. On the whole, I'll give this a 7.5, which is pretty much what its IMDb rating is for a pilot episode. Closer to an 8 because, there's a lot to love about this. The production is amazing. The costumes, the props, the sets, the music is good. The acting is fantastic. I like everything about it. Um, so, it's just why isn't it a 10? It's you know, it's one of those things where after I've watched the whole first season, I'm going to go back and watch the first episode again, and I might, adjust my rating up or down. It just didn't hit me in the man parts, as it were, with greatness, but it hit me with, it's pretty solid. It's like, this is good. I like this a lot. I love being immersed in it. I'd love it if the episode were twice as long. So I wasn't getting tired of it. I was craving more. I am leaning more towards an 8 here on a 10 scale. And I'm really interested in seeing what some of these acolytes. I feel like they're setting up something with all of the sisters, and a new rivalry with the heretics who are like, don't do the breeding program, which they're keeping secret and hidden because maybe it uses forbidden technology. That'll be interesting to see how that develops. How the Atreides is going to be in, because if they mention this whole thing about the Atreides taking credit for winning the Butlerian Jihad when they didn't deserve it, and how did the House Harkonnen deal with that? That feels like an important nugget. Why would you include that in there? So that's got to rear its head somewhere on. So I love that. I think they left a lot of really interesting breadcrumbs, and I think the show has a lot of promise. So I'm very much looking forward to it. I've been eagerly awaiting it, and I was watching something else before it aired, and then it was like, oh, it's 10:30, and I was like, well, I'm not waiting. So I stayed up very late to watch the episode, and I was glad I did, because it was worth it, and I enjoyed the show. So let me know in the comments if you have any questions about it. Let me know your thoughts so far. And like I said, it's a first episode. There's a lot that they're trying to do. You're trying to thread a lot of needles. You're trying to establish a lot of things. And I think they did a pretty admirable job. And it's one of those things where I think they did put some stuff in there that on your first watch, it might have slowed things down or felt like unnecessary. But later on, you'll be like, no, this was great. This was important. And look at all these clues that they left. So I think this is going to probably end up being a better episode by the time you've gotten through that 6-episode season. Hopefully not like by the end of season 3, this episode started to look really good. I'm hoping that they're able to square that circle here by the end of 6 episodes. So we'll see how it goes, and we'll track their progress. And I'll try to do a video about each episode here, and then I'll do one about the whole season, talking about it. I might do a battle language where I'll bring in some other people who have watched it, and we'll all fight it out and see who prevails. And let me know if you have any questions. I don't know if I'll be able to answer them, but I mean, I'm well steeped in Dune lore. There was a lot of stuff going on. There were a lot of references that I understood. I know what they were talking about. I told my wife, you do not have to watch this because you're not going to like it as much as I do, and you're not going to understand it even half as much as I do. And she was like, good. She might come back to it later on because she does like stories about strong women, and she does enjoy the Game of Thrones type of the thing. But here, if I've seen the whole thing and then I'm watching it again with her, I can much easier say that's important, or don't worry about that. It comes up later, and you don't have to understand it yet. So we'll see how it goes. But yes, let me know your comments. Let me know your questions. We'll get into it, and then we'll see you again soon.